Welcome to the Darkest Dungeon mod spotlight, where I will showcase a modded hero and explain their mechanics. Today we will be taking a look at the Enigma, created by Exaelus. Enigma was human once, though it is hard to still call him that now that his skin has been cursed to stone. Despite that, he's doing rather well, and his mystical powers have only grown since then. As the name Enigma implies, there is not much known about this hero. He tends to keep quiet about himself and socialize little. The Enigma is a pretty weird class. I suppose the best description would be to call him a buffer, but he can do okay damage, stunning, or healing depending on. The Enigma has a truly bizarre set of stats. His health is very low. He has 0 dodge, even at max rank. His speed is only 2 at max level. It's just ridiculously low. His blight resistance is pretty low, and debuff resistance is also pretty below average. His damage is a little below average, like 15% lower than the average. It's not too bad. On the other hand, his stun resistance is extremely high. His bleed resistance is very high. His disease resistance is Plague Doctor levels, I want to say, 50%. His move resistance is very high. His trap disarm is really high, 50% of rate. And his crit is average, that's fine. And his ability to move can move forward and back 2 spaces, so he can correct his position pretty easily. But one thing you need to understand about his low health and his low dodge is that he comes with a base amount of protection of 40%. From level 1 up to max rank, it's just built into his armor. I mean, it's not shown here, but he gets this 40% all the time. But when his health drops under 66%, he loses 20% protection. And when he drops under 33% health, he loses another 20%. When he gets healed up, that debuff goes away. So this is supposed to represent his stone skin kind of getting chipped away. He has a lot of protection at high health and very little protection at low health. So this does give him a bit of a buffer against single powerful attacks, but it does make him weak against blight in particular because of his lower blight resist. But his bleed resistance is okay. Just keep him healthy and you won't need to worry about it. Now let's talk about the Enigma skills. This is going to be one of those few times that I talk about them out of order because it is very important to understand how these two skills work. Arcane Fervour and Esoteric Barrier. First, we'll talk about Arcane Fervour. It is a limited use skill. You can only use it 4 times at the lowest rank, up to 8 times at max rank. You can use it from any position. You buff all of your allies' damage by 5% until the end of combat. This is everyone except for the Enigma. He gets different bonuses. So you give them 5% damage every time you use this, so you can, during a boss battle, just use this over and over to stack up that damage on the rest of your party. It doesn't go away. For short battles, it's not quite as useful. However, the Enigma also gives himself some buffs. He always buffs his bleed chance by 120% to 160% for one attack. Just hit the next attack he does on the next turn. If you wait, you lose it, but on the next turn, you will have that bleed buff. You have an 80% chance to get a crit buff of 10 to 20%, again, for just one attack. and a 60% chance to boost his damage by 80 to 100% for just one attack. So the idea would be you use Arcane Fervour to buff your team, get some buffs on the Enigma himself, then he does an attack on the next turn, then you can use the Arcane Fervour again to rebuff as well as boosting up your party. Now, the Enigma's other buffing skill is Esoteric Barrier. Again, he can use it from any position. He can use it 4 to 8 times per battle, and it targets all allies other than himself. It buffs their protection by 5% until the end of combat. So it's a great way, again, in boss fights to help reduce the damage everyone's taking, and it never goes away. In addition, the Enigma buffs his own healing by 120 to 160%. He has an 80% chance to buff his debuff skill chance by 120 to 160%. He has a 60% chance to buff his stun skill chance for one turn for 120 to 160%. Again, these buffs only last for one turn, so you'll be able to use Esoteric Barrier, then the next turn throw out a heal on your allies, or throw out a stun on your enemies. It can be a little awkward in really short fights, because the Enigma is so slow, and you want to buff up your skills to be able to get those stuns, the increased healing, but sometimes it feels like it can be really hard to fit it in. But for those longer fights, it can be pretty useful to get those extra effects. Now, let me tell you, the Enigma was a real pain to get video footage for, because the percent chance to get the Enigma buffs for like debuff and stun, he kept failing whenever I wanted to show off a certain move, and I wouldn't be able to get the stuns or the debuffs, and just screw you, Enigma. But it just goes to show how he can be kind of unreliable at times. Don't bank on the stun skill chance or the debuff skill chance to really protect your team. It's just a nice bonus if you can get it. Now, the Enigma's first offensive skill is Mystic Bolt. He has to be in the middle 2 positions to use it, and can use it against the front 3 positions of the enemy team. It has pretty good accuracy, so missing's not really much of a problem with it. It has a positive damage modifier once you start ranking it up. It starts at 0% up to a max of 20% bonus damage. It is armor piercing, so it's great against tanky targets like Pelagic Guardians. It has a 0% chance to stun, which of course can be increased by Trinkets or the Esoteric Barrier buff. And it does an additional 40% damage versus stunned. This is a good bread and butter skill to just blast an enemy with if you don't want to spend the time buffing, because getting through their armor and having a small positive damage modifier still tends to do pretty good, especially if you give him a damage. Destroyed. The Enigma's next attack is Illusionary Slash, and he must be in the middle 2 positions to use it, and it hits both of the front 2 positions of the enemy team. It does minus 40% damage. It ignores guard. It has a 0% chance to bleed for 3 to 7 points of damage for 2 turns. It does a bonus 15 to 35% damage versus bleeding enemies. And it has a 0% chance to debuff the enemy, preventing guard on those 2 enemies for 2 turns. So if you use Arcane Fervour, you can get that bleed chance, which is a pretty significant amount of extra damage. It's 6 points up to 14 points at max rank total. That's not too bad. Or if you use Esoteric Barrier, then you have the debuff skill chance to be able to break through guards. I mean, the Enigma himself can attack through the guard using this skill, but then he can prevent them from getting guarded by something else. The Enigma's next attack is Phantasmal Shot. He must be in the middle 2 positions to use it, and it hits all of the back 3 positions of the enemy team. It has a minus 60% damage modifier, a minus 4% crit modifier at rank 1, which gets reduced to a 0% crit modifier at max rank. It has a bleed, a 0% chance to bleed for 2 to 5 for 2 turns. It ignores stealth and does 50 to 100% bonus damage versus stealth, and it removes stealth. So this could be a great person to include if you want to deal with all those new stealth guys, the friggin' Fusiliers, the Logic Shamans. All of them are helpless against the Phantasmal Shot. Additionally, it has a 0% chance to debuff all targets for 5 to 15% crit chance and 1 to 5 speed till the end of combat. So this is actually a pretty cool debuff. Usually you don't see debuffs that last the entire combat, but you do have to buff yourself up with Esoteric Barrier first, and if you're using that, then you're not getting the bleed or extra damage on it. Plus, if you wanted to use it to de-stealth enemies, then you'd probably be using it on the first turn. So it is a little conditional to try to get that debuff, but it can be a great way to greatly slow down a boss and prevent them from critting your team. Otherwise, I don't find it's typically a good damage skill. The Enigma's next skill is Delusional Exertion. You must be in the middle 2 positions to use it, and it hits both of the middle 2 positions of the enemy team. It has a minus 30% damage modifier, and has a penalty of 4% crit up to 0% crit at max rank. It is also armor piercing, which is nice considering his low damage. It's better to not have it reduced much further. It has a 0% chance to stun both targets, and it has a 0% chance to debuff the target's dodge and protection by 10 to 20 points until the end of combat. Just like Phantasmal Shot, you can get a lot of value out of this by using Esoteric Barrier first, and then you can stun and debuff those targets quite a bit. You can use this as the boss and take down a good chunk of their defenses and make it that much easier to fight them. The Enigma's last move is not an attack, but a heal. He must be in the middle 2 positions to use it, but he can heal anyone in the party. It heals them for 1 to 2 points at first rank up to 3 to 6 at max rank, and this heal cannot crit for some reason. He also gives the target a 4 to 8 accuracy buff for 3 turns at rank 1, 4 turns starting at rank 3, and 5 turns at max rank. So it can be a pretty significant buff in those longer fights. As a heal, it's not that great. If you plan on using W heal a lot, you certainly want to give him a healing trinket to bring it up to more acceptable levels. And you probably want maybe a little self-healing in your party, or someone like the Arbalest to supplement his healing as necessary. Another option is alternating it with Esoteric Barrier, of course, to boost your party's protection and increase that healing. So you can use Barrier, and then the next turn you can see who got hurt, and then you can use Unusual Dynamism to give a much more reasonable heal once you've had that healing. Now, the types of skills that I liked using with the Enigma were usually his stunning skills, like Mystic Bolt, Delusional Exertion. I would use his heal quite frequently, and then Esoteric Barrier, of course, if you want to buff up his skill chance, or his stun skill chance. I found it a little hard to use Illusionary Slash and Phantasmal Shot, even when I equipped Arcane Fervour, but this was typically what I preferred. And Mystic Bolt, as I said, is a pretty decent skill to use even without buffing his damage. So I would find myself using Mystic Bolt to finish off stray enemies or hit priority targets as necessary. Delusional Exertion can be nice if you get that stun skill chance. Then you have a pretty good chance of stunning 2 enemies, which helps make up for the fact that the Enigma is so slow. Because having 0 to 1 speed is really bad. One other thing, as you may have mentioned, or as you may have noticed, all of his skills other than the 2 buffs, he can only use from the middle 2 positions. This makes him a little susceptible to being shuffled. He does have pretty good move resistance, but that doesn't stop his party members from getting shuffled around and pushing him to the front or the back, where he can't use his moves. This is a distinct weakness that he has, but it's not too bad. At the very least, he can still use his buffs from there if you feel that's more important, or if someone else on your party will be able to correct his position without wasting too much. Now, the Enigma has a set of pretty useful and interesting camping skills. We're going to go through them in reverse order because the last one is the most interesting. Stone Skin for 4 time points. Your entire party buffs their max HP by 15%, and it heals them for 15% as well to bring you up to that new maximum. This can be a great way to help protect your party. Your tanky heroes get even more tanky, and your fragile heroes might get that much more of a buffer to prevent them from getting crit to 0% health in one shot. Esoteric Arcanist for 3 time points. He increases his stun skill chance and bleed skill chance by 100% for 2 battles, and he reduces his healing skills by 100% for 2 battles as well. So if you don't want him being a healer and you just want him stunning and bleeding, use Esoteric Arcanist to get a pretty big boost, but it only lasts for 2 battles, so it's usually best as something you would use right before a boss fight. You can get much more likely to inflict stun or bleed even without buffing yourself up with Arcane Fervour or Esoteric Barrier. And if you do buff yourself up, then you can stun a lot of things. Having plus 240% stun skill chance or more, that's a lot. His next camping skill is Puzzling Riddles for 3 time points. All companions lose 10 stress. They have a 66% chance to lose an additional 10 stress, and a 33% chance of losing 20 additional stress. It's a reasonable camping skill to help alleviate stress from your party. Unfortunately, it doesn't affect the Enigma himself, but you can probably find some other stress heal elsewhere on your party for him. That's usually not too big of a deal. And his last camping skill is the most interesting, Enigmatic Manifestation. For 1 time point, you create a Fragment of Power or a Trinket for this class. It has 6 uses, maximum. Now, what is a Fragment of Power? Fragment of Power is a provision that you can only get by using this camping skill. There are 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 8. Yes, there are 8 of these Fragments of Power, and the hero who uses them will gain a buff for the entire quest. There's the Fragment of Potential, which gives 15% damage. There is the Fragment of Endurance, which gives 15% HP. The Fragment of Evasion, which gives 10 dodge. The Fragment of Armor gives 10 protection. The Fragment of Haste gives 3 speed. The Fragment of Precision gives 5 accuracy. The Fragment of Lethality gives 5 crit. And the Fragment of Vitality gives a regen of 1 point per turn for 30 turns, and this heal cannot crit. Every time you use Enigmatic Manifestation, there is a total weight of 79 for the possible outcomes of what you can get out of this. Every one of the fragments has a weight of 10. The Vitality fragment, the one that gives regen, has a lower weight at 6. And the special Enigma trinkets have a weight of 3. So they're pretty rare, but if you keep trying it, eventually you'll pick them up. I'll go over the special trinkets in a bit. Now, these Fragments of Power, you can use them right away if you want, but you can also take them back to the hamlet where they will show up in the embark screen where you can buy provisions. And this will allow you to farm up fragments on some missions and then bring those fragments with you on other missions when you think you'll need that extra boost of power. Each hero can only use 1 of each type of fragment for the mission. You can't, take an entire stack of damage trinkets and put them all on your bounty hunter and get 1,000,000,000% damage. No. But you can take 1 of each and put them all on 1 hero if you really want to. So the Enigma can help boost a weaker class, or maybe you can give some extra protection or health to a under-leveled hero to help get them through a mission to level up. Or you're fighting a really tough boss and you want to give yourself that much more of a boost. The Enigma can be pretty helpful in that regard. So these are the Enigma's unique trinkets. He can only get them by using his camping skill, Enigmatic Manifestation, and only rarely at that case. He has 2 sets and 1 standalone trinket. On the left, you have the Arcane Mysticism set, which is focused around doing more damage, doing more bleed, and not a whole lot else. He gets that big debuff to stun and debuff skill chance, so you're not going to be doing that most of the time. But you get some pretty big bonuses to damage on what I would think would be most of your damage skill. I always felt Mystic Bolt and Delusional Exertion were pretty good in that regard. But if you want to bleed with his other attacks, then you still have that plus 40% bleed skill chance. On the right, you have the set Esoteric Barricade, which is focused around increasing the Enigma's protections and health, as well as giving him some actual dodge, and buffing up his stun and debuff skill chance, and his healing, but he will be unable to bleed the enemy. I think that this one's pretty good. It doesn't reduce your offensive capabilities that much, especially if you're not using Arcane Fervour to boost your bleed skill chance. You're not losing much, and it'll make you that much more able to stun and debuff enemies. And in the middle, you have the Puzzling Crystal, which gives you 66% damage versus Stonework, as useful as that is. And it gives you minus 33% stress if you are in exactly position 3, so it limits you even more. You can't be in position 2, even though you can use all of his skills from there, but you get less stress for it. And if you put him in position 4, before the end of a quest, you'll get 33% more Resolve XP if you wanted to level up Enigma. Some other interesting facts about the Enigma: he is non-religious. You cannot have 2 Enigmas in the party at a time. You can only have 1. He is also incompatible with the modded class, the Revenant, which is another class by Exaelus. When you recruit the Enigma, he has 0 quirks. He has no positive and no negative quirks and must gain them later. When you want to relieve his stress, he can only drink, gamble, or meditate. Flagellation does nothing because he's got stone skin. I guess he's not religious, so he doesn't pray. Mysticism or something. And I'd imagine that the brothel isn't his thing either. Most quirks that affect what stress relief facilities you can use are incompatible, like Tippler or Gambler, stuff like that. He benefits from the Athenaeum district, which gives additional blight and debuff skill chance, as well as relieving stress by interacting with knowledge curios. This can be helpful considering he can't cure his own stress with puzzling riddles, so that can help keep his stress down if your party doesn't have other means to do so. And when you take him on missions, he comes with 1 shovel as provision. In conclusion, the Enigma is a bizarre and powerful buffer. I can't say I ever regret bringing him. He is usually effective as long as you plan properly, and even without considering his combat capabilities, being able to create fragments of power is useful to buff up your party for entire missions. He does suffer from extremely low speed, so getting quirks like Quick Draw can be useful to go ahead of the enemy some of the time at least. I think there are a couple of ways to use the Enigma effectively, so try different things out and see what works best for you.